Bishop Joshua, we started Monday of this week talking about the dominion mandate. So when sin came in, man lost the right to rule, but the desire and the capacity, and if I could say it this way, the hardwiring to walk in dominion was still there. And so we can't run from this dominion mandate. And I was trying to figure out, these are some notes from when you were teaching years ago. And I don't know if you said this and I wrote it down or if I was thinking this, but
that's exactly what I remember. Those are
this right here, dominion is like matter.
It
does not disappear, it changes state.
Like water. Water doesn't disappear. What I was explaining there is that God created us with power to rule. If we don't use it, somebody else will. So once we abdicate, then some other person will use it. When the church was at the center of the life of America, the church was exercising godly dominion. When the church abdicated, somebody else took it, or other people start to take it. If you don't take influence in media, then you'll have fake news and all that. If you don't take in arts and entertainment, then Hollywood will be changed. Though started by Christians, it will end up in... So dominion is like water, matter, sorry. It doesn't disappear. It just changes form. You heat it, water, then it changes to ice, or it changes to vapor.
Well, you said something here, and this was years ago. But if the righteous do not take dominion, the wicked will. And when society surrenders, mob rule begins.
That's right.
I want to ask you all listening today, are we there? We're seeing lawlessness in this land. But as Charles Finney said, that if our society, if immorality prevails in the land, the pulpit is to blame. If our government is falling apart, the pulpit is to blame. And I say it this way, the most powerful media, if you will, in the nation is not the the mainstream media, it's the pulpit, because God chose the foolishness of preaching to confound the wise. And then he sends his word to heal us and to deliver us from destruction. So if you have preachers that are saying we have no business talking about politics or government or being involved, then that is a masterstroke of Satan. So the Bible says that the government shall be upon his shoulders. And where does governance come in on this? Because like you said, if we're not occupying these mountains and spheres, somebody will be, and it'll be darkness.
We have a call to governance, the same way the church still has call to education. Look at the way the church abdicated from education. Let's first go back where we ended in the last session. When the Puritans and other evangelicals, congregation, all that were in charge, they started institutions of learning. Harvard, John Harvard, Elihu Yale, Princeton University, all these universities, today they are universities, but then they were colleges, which were intended to raise godly leadership. And they were to send people to preach the gospel. Now, the emphasis was always with God. Emphasis is God, and then with God and all the other things. So God is the basis of everything that is taught, and then they now take education, then they take media, but first and foremost, they would teach people to fear God, to love God, like the shield of Harvard. What did it say, the original one? The truth for the church. And so you can see that the whole focus was all the spheres of influence. So education was in the hands of the church. And because it was churning out godly leaders, you had a godly nation. When 150 years ago, when the church abdicated, the church wasn't involved. Now these education institutions were taken over by the liberals, who don't want God anywhere. The think tanks were taken over. The think tank the soul of the nation is now going to be filled with all these ideas which are not godly, or which are anti-God for that matter. And so, although people may be wise in the wisdom that we call wisdom, that's not the Bible. The Bible doesn't call that wisdom. Anything. A fool has said in his heart there is no God. So once you say you remove God, you're already foolish, whether you accept it or agree with it or not. So the moment you remove God, you've brought in foolishness. You may be very wise in the sense of being clever, but the wisdom of God, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So the nation now, the soul of the nation is devoid of true wisdom, of godly wisdom. And then you leave the whole nation in the hands of people who don't love or fear God. What you call the cultural revolution in the 1960s is a result of many years that had started about 80 years earlier in 1880, when all the think tanks, the church abdicated after the Civil War. And then the people took over now. Liberals, the church is ashamed of what they had done, and then they abdicated the educational institutions. And then when the institutions are taken over, then you churn out people who don't fear God. Take an example of a lawyer, or an accountant for that matter. If an accountant is highly educated, you are only educating the mind, and then he has a lot of skills, and those are the only two. The full education has 4 elements: the head, the heart, the hands, and the house. Those 4 H's complete the cycle of education. The church offers that kind of education where the person is academically astute, they have skills, but also they have the heart. Head, heart, hands, that is skills. Then house has to do with community responsibility, corporate responsibility, your responsibility to love your neighbors, you love yourself. That is the 4th H. So that education can only be offered by the church. When you remove God, then all you have is the academic, which is the head, and then the skills, which is the hands, but there is no heart, and then there is no people loving. Your capitalism results into greed. The original capitalism was a capitalism which had community consideration. You always think about that when God has blessed me, I need to use my wealth to bless. Those are the original businessmen like Cyrus McCormick, who invented the Ripper, became very rich, but they were using all their wealth, their treasures for community, for transformation. Washington Carver, he uses his wisdom, he transforms the whole of the South by just, discovering 300 products of the peanut. So that's the difference. You have the head, the heart, the hands, and the house. That's the complete education which only the church offers that. When the church abdicates, then where you have the heart and the house, so there is no character, and there is no loving my neighbor as myself. So then you remain with greed. So an accountant or auditor who has been greatly educated, you give him any position, he's going to use that skill to steal. He's so educated that when he steals, you can't even trace, he leaves no audit trail. So he's using... It's
brilliance used in the wrong way.
Cunningness. So even if you bring a sniffer dog, it cannot find where this money was taken. So
I went with our church one time, the prison ministry. Yeah. Our penitentiaries are down in Canyon City. Yeah. And we went in there, and they were, we brought some instruments, and several of us went down there. So I was preaching, but then we had a worship team. And they were checking, you can't take this in and that in. And I asked him, I said, well, why not? And he started telling me, and that's when it hit me, some of the most brilliant minds are in the penitentiaries. They're locked up, but they didn't have the light of God.
The heart.
And the word says that their foolish hearts were darkened.
Yeah.
And then they become alienated from the life of God. But now, as a nation, our culture has become darkened. So one of the things we've seen, Joshua, like for instance, we're here in Colorado Springs, our murder rate has gone up. I just heard of some murders recently that were unusual, strangulations, just not too far from here. Horrific execution-style murders. Our district attorney meeting with one of our staff pastors, Pastor Calvin, said, I've never seen it like this before. We're seeing it across the country, and this is why this message is so important, because we have taken God out of the public arena, whereas our founding fathers birthed the entire culture from the Word. And I remember, so I'm outspoken on these things, but it's just truth. The Democratic platform has been known as liberal for a lot of years, but when I was a little boy, they have recordings of very well-known Democrats that were totally against abortion. Then fast forward up to the last several years, they officially removed God from their platform. This is on record. And so when they do that, it has gone down to another darker level. So basically your message of discipling nations is about bringing God back into the public square.
Including every party. That's what, so it's not just one party. When the godly are in authority, they go in every party. So in other words, you have about 3-4 parties, but all of them have godly leaders. So you are...
Well, and we just had a very well-known Democrat leave the Democratic Party, Tulsi Gabbard. She said, I'm out of this. And so what happens is the system is corrupt and it affects people. But we're to bring the gospel to every creature. So let's go back to what you were talking. So Mark dealt with the individual. Matthew deals with nations.
The systems.
The systems.
The institutions.
Which would be the 7 spheres.
Of influence.
Of influence.
So what Jesus meant is go and change all of them. Infiltrate all of them. Those are the 7 parables. When Jesus was giving the 7 parables, he had just preached to the masses. And the disciples took him aside and said, why did you say this? He said, these are the mysteries of the kingdom. For the first time, I'm going to show you how my kingdom is going to be. So he has talked about the sower, the parable of the sower, and they don't understand what is that. So in essence, he said, let me explain. I have come as a sower. Our kingdom was overthrown. The devil came in. But I've come to bring it back. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be. So I've come back to bring in the new kingdom as a sower. What do I sow? The word. This kingdom I'm bringing is built on the truth. The devil rules on lies and ignorance. Mine is truth. Whenever you bring truth, you handle ignorance and you handle deceit or lies. So my kingdom, you are going to take the word. It is my word that I send to heal. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So it's the truth, so I'm the sower. Then he explains another second principle about the leaven. That although we are going to start very small, this teaching will just like bread, or the leaven.
The leaven into the bread, and little goes a long way.
So that's how my kingdom is going to be. We'll start with the word, and then he's comparing the hearts of men in the word, the sower. Remember, being and then doing?
Yes.
So being is that when this word will get into the hearts of men, it will change their hearts. And it's through that heart that they will now spread this teaching. And the sower is Jesus himself. The word are the seeds. The soils are the hearts of men. So that is key, so key. And it's the parable. These ones, he interprets personally. The sower, and then the second one. So he goes on 7 parables up to the end, meaning from now, this is how the whole thing is going to unfold. He brings out that leaven, how the teaching will, and then the mustard seed, that it starts like it's very small, my kingdom, but it's going to take over and be a blessing to the whole world. When America first espoused this kind of political freedom and liberty, look at how it is eating, and our nations had never known freedom, have never known liberty. Kings were tyrants. Kings would come and take your wife at will. The king would say, I'm coming such and such a village. So everybody who had a beautiful wife, we knew we would not survive because the king would take.
You told us those stories in the class. Our class couldn't believe it. I mean, when the king comes, if he decides he wants your wife, he's taking your wife.
You thank him. You even thank him.
Oh, yeah.
One time there was a man who had a very beautiful wife. And when he said that, and everybody knew, the king somebody must have told him. So the guy loved his wife. So, and he declared, anything I touch, whatever I touch first, is what I take.
So is that the king?
The king.
The king said
is
that.
Coming to the
So whatever he touches first, he's got it.
He got it. So everybody knew now, the king comes in my family or my courtyard, whatever he touches first. So what this man did was to put his wife on top of the house. Beautiful wife on top of the house. And then he put a ladder. Okay? So as soon as the king came in and everybody knew what he was looking for, so he saw the wife up there.
Up on the roof.
And so he came and he started to climb the ladder. He said, oh, king, live forever. So you want the ladder. So that's how his wife survived.
See, Westerners can't conceive of this. Where the word of a king is.
Because you've lived in a culture that has embraced truth. The culture you enjoy was not like that all along. Your founding fathers came from a culture of oppression in Europe. So they said we need to go to a place where we can freely worship God and institutionalize what we believe. That's what the pilgrims, they lived 7 years in Holland, they could not, so they came here. They said we need a place like that, and others. And then they institutionalized these teachings and these truths. That's why to you, you think they're just your culture. They were not. It wasn't your culture. You were also as polygamous as others in Europe. Your grandfathers were polygamous. When Martin Luther started the Reformation, he started the first bishop to be married after many years. He started the table talks where he taught students at the universities. And then for the first time, they have a bishop who is married. And he teaches about marriage. The whole of Europe understood marriage. Then he started education. Education belonged only to the church. It was an institution of the church, by the church, for the church. The farmers, the carpenters didn't go to school. It was only the rich, the nobles, who could pay for their few children to study because they were going to become nobles and leaders. The church educated the priests, and they could also educate the nobles because they had the money to pay for it. The rest of the people didn't. Martin Luther, picking from 1 Peter 2:9, said, all of us are priests, all of us are kings. So he said, if all of us are priests, then we must study. So education starts, and Germany becomes the most educated nation in the world at that time. And that's why it became so great. The moment it cut its roots from God, that's how Hitler rose to power. And then he was using that powerful base to terrorize the world. That's what America will become. If America, with its greatness, does not stick to their God, you remove God from a great nation, then it lands into the hands of tyrants who will use the arsenal, the power, to terrorize the whole world.
You nailed it. I think that's probably the lowest common denominator. I forget his first name, Gramsci. He was a socialist imprisoned, I believe, from the Soviet Union. But he made the statement that you cannot overthrow a civilization until the roots of Christianity are cut.
Yes.
And what you talk, so the kingdom, basically, and I've said it this way, America, this is a fact, that if there was no Bible, there could be no America.
Yes, of course.
And the fact that
It would have been there, but not the America you see today.
not what we see right here. And we're only 4% of the world's population, yet we're the most powerful.
Yeah.
We're the wealthiest.
Yes.
We've produced more of the creative technology and inventions,
Innovation.
sending of the
GDP per
missionaries.
capita is what? 60,000 per person. In our country, we are less than 1,000. About $1,000 per person per annum. Here it is 60,000. You are double most of the European nations. So you look at that,
And,
per capita.
you know, and it's known that if you come to America and just get at the poverty level and get on welfare, be at poverty level, you're living above the middle class in Europe.
Exactly.
And so, you know, we look and go, and we just don't see it. We're blinded to that. So when it comes to discipling nations, what I'm hearing you say, Joshua, is it's systems.
Yeah.
And so for our discussions.
And it has to be so that, you see, the people who sit in the church, the teacher should understand that the salvation I have is not for me. It is for not only me to be healed, to be delivered, to be blessed. I have to take it to where I am teaching. I have 50 students in my class every year, as I'm the class teacher. So I'm a pastor. Pastoring is not a title, it's a function. Every teacher is a pastor, is pastoring those children. So he has to understand that that teacher to pray for these students continually, daily, by mentioning them to God. Every believer starts to know that this is my calling. A person who is standing or behind the camera understands that I'm doing this as a ministry. I'm not just doing a job. This is a ministry. A teacher is doing ministry. When I come to church every Sunday, I come to find the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers to equip me so that I can do the work of ministry where I am. So I'm a teacher, and I'm supposed to change and transform these students or pupils. While they are before me, I'll impact their lives. By the time they leave me, they will never change again. The impact I've made on their lives will live on long after they have. That's what God wants. A teacher who sits in, an administrator, whoever you call a lawyer, each and every believer. So discipling a nation, therefore, involves moving from an individual to the household, to the church, local church, to the spheres of influence, to cities, and finally to the nation. In our next session, I'll be dealing with that. How you move an individual from Lord bless me and my wife, our son Tom and Henry, ask for no more. Amen. If you have those kind of believers, which we have everywhere.
They're out there.
It's so difficult to disciple a nation. It doesn't matter how many broadcasts you do here. If the church has not embraced this, for the pastors to know that the people who sit in my pews, each one of them, is supposed to disciple, to be extending the kingdom in their own spheres. They have to be the people who God has called into media. They are evangelists, even if they don't have a title. So all these people here have an evangelistic calling. It is you to tell them. And then they start to look for ways. Hey, how am I supposed to invade the waves for good news? And then their prayer will be like that, so that they don't come to media for money. Money is the secondary thing. It's not, you can work without money. If God has called you, there are times that He can send you. I worked 7 years without being paid. I had no salary. But after that, God bless everything. So there are times when God can even call you to work without money. So when people, they look at their jobs as everything, those people cannot be channels for discipling the nation. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next session.
Again, these broadcasts are just flying by so quickly. Powerful stuff. Thank you for watching this video, and be sure to explore more of my YouTube channel for more content like this. Then if you want to learn more about what we do, or if you want to partner with us, be sure to visit my website at markcowart.org. May the Lord bless you richly.